Welcome back, viewers. You are still tuned into Prime Live. We are so privileged to welcome Siphesihle Mbhele, who is the co-founder and host of the Activating Youth Activism podcast. Both Simphiwe Masilo and Siphesihle are at the forefront of youth-led social change in South Africa. Our discussion today will delve into the power as well as the potential of youth activism in driving sustainable development. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on Prime Live.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to the discussion.
Oh, us as well. I mean, I'm always excited to hear about platforms like this that put youth activism at the forefront and particularly young voices at the forefront. But before we get into all of that, let's start off by getting an understanding about how did the idea of activating youth activism come about, and what are your goals when you started the podcast?
Thank you so much. So actually, it was a COVID brainchild, really, between my co-host and myself, who had been meeting in youth gatherings online through the South African Institute of International Affairs and the YPC. And there we saw sort of a gap in traditional media engagement on young people and keeping the youth sort of population engaged in terms of democracy and current affairs. And it was also after the elections, 2019 elections, so we had seen sort of young people engagement and sort of the disengagement from political discourse and conversation. And we wanted to create our own platform where we can create that engagement platform for young people and have conversations with other young people who are in different spaces, who are making change, so that to sort of inspire and spark activism amongst those populations, spark curiosity that will inspire young people to want to be involved, to want to engage in different platforms. So that's how it came about. And 3 years later, we're still here and we're on INX. So we must be doing something good.
Absolutely. It's a privilege for us to be, able to have this conversation with you. I'm always inspired to hear about the incredible things that people did during the COVID pandemic and, all the brilliant ideas that were ignited during that difficult time. It's lovely to see that it was used in a way that, was for free thinking and something that is innovative like this. I think our young people absolutely need platforms like this to inspire them into activism because, with our TikTok generations, I don't think they're as motivated to get into the space of social change and wanting to make a difference and having a voice when it comes to the issues that particularly affect young people. So I think this is a wonderful platform to inspire young people to do more than TikTok with their lives. But in your opinion, what do you feel is the biggest challenge that is currently facing young people who want to become activists and want to be active in that space? And how do you feel they should overcome it?
I think that just before I move to the question, is that TikTok, the entire idea around activating youth activism was creating a platform outside of really traditional media to keep young people engaged. And even TikTok can be that platform. So it's about how do we harness the really existing platforms in front of us that we know have, a broad reach on young populations for meaningful engagement and meaningful conversations outside of entertainment. And even TikTok can be sort of that tool. And I'm glad to see that a lot of young people are also doing the same. Now, on the question on, the challenges that are faced by young people who are sort of trying to be involved in activism, I think really it's firstly access, as a young person as myself, who's now here after a lot of pivoting and maneuvering. I think it's access to information on how to get involved, where to get involved, and sort of what are the avenues that young people need to take to make actual impact. So that could be having an idea. You could have an idea. You could know that you're passionate about, some things, but you don't know where to go and how to go. Particularly young people who are in township schools, young people who are in informal settlements, living through very serious social injustices and crime, etc., but want to make a change and not knowing where that is. I think that starts with sort of access to information and them wanting to make that change. So to not have a misplaced anger, but having places where they can, sort of make that contribution. Second, it's with organizations also like AYA who have ideas on how to implement sort of changes, who have ideas on how to keep young people engaged in democracy and human rights conversations, but need resources to be able to have those tools to implement those sort of ideas to reach those communities in the outskirts of South Africa. So it's access to resources, access to information, but also access to resources to enable small organizations and platforms like ours to make that actual impact. Lastly, also access to platforms, access to media platforms. Thank God we're here with INX and being able to communicate some of the work that we do and the importance of youth engagement in democracy and human rights. But also, broader society also needs to follow that, access to media platforms to be able to create that space, both in speaking like this, but there are some of us who like writing and communicating in that sense. So access to those media platforms as well. And how I think we created our own platform because there was no platform, in COVID. We said, there's no platform, let's create our own. But we also were involved through SAYA and in our high school years. So we approached those organizations. We tried to find people who know them and then got into those places. So it's about searching, pivoting. If there's nothing, start your own, Someone said, if there's no space for you in the table, bring your own chair and sit, So, yeah.
Now, I think that's very powerfully said. And I love that you mentioned that, yes, our young people are on TikTok and doing all the dances and, absorbing all the information from our influences that we are seeing on those platforms. But I love that you said that, being inspired by activism, they can use those platforms to reach so many people. And I really like the observations that you mentioned just now, is that it's not that young people don't have, a lack of motivation to want to do these things and want to be active in spaces, is they lack the information and platforms and maybe even the resources, which is why I love that you started the podcast. And like you said, you're absolutely bringing the chair to the table with the platform because you're providing young people the access to those resources with the guests that you have on the podcast and with the information that you share as well, which is very powerful. And I love that you mentioned SAIA, the South African Institute of International Affairs. I'm very familiar with them. I'm also a product of, the Model UN debates, and it was something that was so culturally enriching, and it opens your mind to the perspective of what is going on around the world, and it empowers you with a voice to be able to have opinions on these things and have ideas on how to solve them. But talking about, South African youth and what they should be thinking about and what they should be doing, how do you envision the future of youth activism in South Africa?
I think the future of youth activism is very rich. Because we have a very innovative and a very curious young population. I mean, in South Africa and outside, we've had so many young people trying to engage with AYA and trying to know, how do I get involved? Every time you post something, how do I get involved? I want to be a part of AYA. So the future is very rich, but we also need a future where, we're able to have solutions and support for youth organizations in South Africa, where we're creating platforms where young people can be able to come and share their perspectives and share their experiences, because they have direct experiences, modernized direct experiences of sort of the current issues in South Africa. And so that's how I think the future is very rich, the future is very diverse, but I think that it needs recognition from institutions, from political parties, to recognize the voices of young people who are working tirelessly to keep other young people engaged, and to recognize those young people who are being engaged and trying to participate from the outskirts and the periphery of South Africa, looking for opportunities. Thank God we found SAYA, yeah.
I love that perspective, and I love your positivity for the future. I think that young South Africans are absolutely so ambitious and have amazing ideas on how we can transform the country, how we can address social issues, particularly facing young people. So I also, I agree with you. I think the future is absolutely bright when it comes to activism and the spaces that young people will continue to create for themselves in South Africa. But before we let you go, of course, we've spoken about the incredible podcast that you co-host, as well as the amazing platform that it provides for young people to engage on important conversations, take inspiration, and also serves as a form of resource for information on how to become activists, how to be more active, how to be more proactive about the issues they're facing in their community. Are you able to share with our audiences how we can stream the podcast? How can we watch? And are there any particular episodes that are coming up that you are particularly excited about?
So thank you very much for that. And just to delve before I move into answering this question, to say that some of the things that I think it's important that I say that, using the platform to make sure that the message is taken across. Some of the things that I think are important for the future and sort of as solutions for youth activism is to create an environment that enables youth activism to thrive, youth participation to thrive. So that also means recognizing youth participation, inclusive political participation of young people, which means even in political parties, recognizing young people who are working tirelessly in communities and giving them the roles in those political parties to be able to lead and make those particular contributions. Because, those are the people you see on the ground at all times, but also creating platforms in terms of funding, in terms of media platform, to have those conversations where young people can share such views, can share the work that they are doing, to be able to inspire that curiosity, but reach an audience that has the capital to ensure that we have the tools, but also supporting organizations that are based in communities, youth-led organizations. I think there are different phases. There's institutional levels, etc. But the community level is also important. The media level is also important, and we need to also be able to support that platform and make sure that we direct resources there. So you can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We are also on Instagram at activating_youth_activism. We're also on Twitter at Activating Youth Activism. And we're also on YouTube, Activating Youth Activism. And you can contact us anytime. Our emails are also there. We are working on a very interesting, I think this is a very timeless interview, because we are currently going through a phase of reimagining and reshaping the Activating Youth Activism podcast, which we are trying to make it a podcast, but also a youth think tank, to make sure that our activism doesn't just end in social media and in the media space, but how do we transcend that into communities? How do we transcend that into making young people sort of more involved and touching base with real life human beings and make that particular impact? So we're currently really sort of trying to minimize taking out a lot of content in this point, but really sort of thinking about in a phase of restructuring ourselves and for broader impact. But there are very key episodes that I think you can go and look at young people, particularly looking at young people and elections in South Africa, that we had with Karabo Makanyane, one of the leading youth development practitioners in South Africa. We recently had episodes on women's health with one of the people from UNESCO, the United Nations. And it's a feast of knowledge. So it's hard to choose one, but I just highlighted, and you can see the rest of our work on social media, and my brilliant team, Simphiwe Masilo, and our communications manager, Belena Swami.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think we will definitely keep our eyes peeled at your social media platforms for the next and upcoming episode. But thank you so much for joining us this evening and for sharing with us
Thank you.
and for the opportunity you've presented for young people. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity.
Viewers at home, what an incredible platform, and AYA is absolutely leading the way when it comes to driving youth conversation, as well as creating spaces for young people to sit at the tables, and also featuring young people and young activists in South Africa that are doing incredible things. Do reach out to them on their social media platforms to follow on for their next episodes that will be coming up, which sounds incredibly exciting, featuring young people in politics as well as women's health, covering a wide range of topics and discussions. But on that note, it is time for us to head over to an ad break, and we'll come right back.